Every time you talk to someone, you spend the rest of the day thinking about it. They give you a short answer, and you think they hate you. They don't text back fast enough, and you start freaking out. You are looking for reasons to think people don't like you. The last 4 years of my life, I've apologized for, I think, everything. Like, just saying sorry constantly. Someone would bump into me when they could have just gone around me while I was standing still, and I'd say sorry. I would have my own opinions and strong beliefs about something, and I'd backtrack like, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I would text someone, and if they didn't respond in like, I don't know, an hour, I'd convince myself they hated me. And the craziest part is I didn't realize I was doing it or it was even a problem to begin with. I just thought that's how everyone was. Like, everyone worries what people think. Everyone replays conversations in their head at 2 a.m. But then I remember this one time. I was probably 16 or 17, and I posted something on Instagram, and I had a couple followers from the school. A lot of people from a new school that I moved to. In about a day, no one liked that photo. And it was so embarrassing, and I just felt like, wow, I thought I knew these people. I took that to heart. I thought maybe, these people really don't care about me. They must hate me. Maybe I said something to a couple people to make them mad, and I don't know, maybe they just don't like me anymore. So I spent the weekend just like torturing myself. Like 2 days, I was convinced that these people, who I barely even talked to, like I barely talked to these people, were judging me. Or just, didn't care. They didn't like my stuff. I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now that was a serious problem. And it definitely started when I was younger. Don't exactly know when, but it had to be elementary. I wasn't the loudest kid or like the most popular, but I was friendly with everyone. And I think that's because I was terrified of anyone not liking me. I would change how I acted depending on who I was around. If I was with one group of friends, I'd act another way. There's group A, group B, group C. I was just kind of adapting to whatever I thought people wanted from me. And for a while it worked. Middle school definitely worked. People liked me. I had friends, I fit in. But the problem was I had no idea who I actually was. Like, if you asked me what my actual opinions were on anything at that point, I probably couldn't tell you. Or I probably could, but it wouldn't be my own opinions. It'd be whatever group I'm with. Because my opinions were just whatever the people around me thought. And I didn't realize how exhausting it was going to be trying to keep up with it. Because when you're constantly performing, you're like a jester, constantly monitoring yourself, worrying about how you're going to be perceived or looked at, your brain just never shuts off. Like, you can't relax, you can't be present in the moment, you can't be chill. I remember being with like a group of friends, going to their house, and every interaction I had with them, I was very, I was analyzing everything. Someone would laugh at something I said, and I would spend like 10 minutes trying to figure out if they were laughing with me or at me. I had to constantly be aware of how I was coming across people. And the thing that made it worse, right, is that I was good at hiding it. Like, it sounds somewhat emo, but like on the outside, I seemed fine, like confident even. But inside, dude, I was thinking about it a lot. Just constantly second guessing everything. Because there was a lot of people that I would talk to, and I was basically just performing. And so the worst part about caring too much is that you start losing yourself. And I don't mean that in like a deep philosophical way. I mean, like, literally you forget who you are. Because when you spend all the time trying to be what other people want, you stop knowing what you want. You stop having your own opinions, your own style, your own interest. And that was the biggest thing ever in high school. Like, I had no according to some people, I had no style. I had to be like them. And another group had to be like them. Not like had to, but I wore shorts and a hoodie like all the time. And it would definitely be like picked at. But I realistically did not want to dress like the people I hanged out with, because it not my style, I'll say. Not my style. And I'm glad I didn't get dragged into that. But with me and a lot of people, you become this kind of blank slate that molds itself to whoever you're around. Like, I'm not a mean person, but I would be mean to specific people if my friends were being mean to these specific people. But then when I'm not with that group, I'm a pretty nice guy. And I started noticing this when I'd make decisions too. Like, I would try to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I realized I had no idea what I actually wanted. Because every decision I made was based on what other people would think. Like, I remember thinking about what to major in. And my thought process wasn't, what do I want to do? It was what looks good, what looks impressive, what would, my friends think is not lame, not weird. And so I would end up choosing something I didn't even care about because it sounded good when I told people, but it really doesn't matter because I didn't go to college anyway. But it wasn't just with college, it was even jobs, hobbies. Nothing was based on what I wanted. It was all designed to get approval. And the thing is, the people whose approval I was chasing didn't even care. I was stressing about impressing people who probably didn't remember or don't remember my name. But, you know, I convinced myself that everyone was watching. Everyone was judging. Everyone cared. When the reality is that most people are too busy worrying about themselves. And right now, I currently am too busy worrying about myself. I do not care really about other people. I don't care what they do, what they say. I'm still in the process of trying to figure out what I want to do. And apparently, I also became a people pleaser. Which, I'll be honest, at the beginning, I swear, it sounded pretty good. I thought that was a good thing. It's actually horrible. It's actually very bad. Because when you're a people pleaser, you say yes to everything. Even when you don't want to. Even when it hurts you, because saying no feels impossible. I would have friends ask me to do stuff, and I'd say yeah. Even if I was like exhausted, even if I had other plans, even if I genuinely didn't want to go or didn't want to do whatever it is, because I couldn't handle the thought of disappointing people. And at first, people kind of liked that about me, at least I think. Like I was the reliable friend, the one who was always down, you know, the one who never caused problems, the one that never said no. But over time, I realized people were kind of taking advantage of it. Like they knew I'd say yes, so they keep asking, and I'd keep saying yes, and I'd keep burning myself out. It could have been anything. I hated specific people, and when they asked me for test answers, and I had them for myself, but you know what happened? I'd give them, you know, my little paper, and they never gave it back to me, and they kept sharing it to all their other friends, and no one gave it back to me. And that happened a lot with a lot of other things. Homework, any class assignments, you can name it, anything. At the time I had Snapchat, everyone added me just to kind of get my answers. That's it. But in my head, saying no meant they wouldn't like me anymore. And I have no idea why I cared. And I think the turning point had to be probably like a year and a half ago. But I was with my quote-unquote friends at like a fair, because I know like one of them, but since, you know, I was so nice, I considered everybody my friend. And that's like 14, 15 people, when really one of them is like my really close friend. Everyone was talking to each other, you know, cracking jokes that were very inside-like. I had no idea what they were talking about, because they have their own lives. Like, I knew these people, but I wasn't friends with them. You know, I wasn't as close as I thought, apparently, in my head. I don't know what I was thinking, but, you know, but it just happens when you're so nice. So I had like $200 that night. Well, after... I had $5. I played a game. I played one game. And, yeah, I suck at throwing stuff. So I missed. It was like pins. Missed horribly. I was like, whatever. Because it was like $15 a game. Insane. After not talking to me for like 30 minutes, everyone asked me, can I play a game? Can I play? I said, yeah. Then after the fact, you know, everyone's done playing their games. I don't think anyone thanked me. At all. I'm starting to think about it. No one thanked me. We walked around more, and it was lemonade. And apparently, you know, it was pretty good lemonade. I say apparently because I didn't get to try any. Some person asked me, hey, can I have some money to get some lemonade? I said, sure. And it was like $7. Then the next person asked me. Then the next. And I said yes to every single person. And then when I had $5 left, I couldn't even get my own lemonade. So what did I do? Nothing. I did nothing. But like those 15 people, 8 asked me, you know, hey, can I have some money? And then only my close friend said, thank you. So I went home, looked at my wallet, saw my $5, because the $200 I had was like hard work money, but it was me helping someone. That's how I got the money. And that was like 2 days of work. Wasted. Completely wasted on people that I do not give a fuck about. But then later that night, I got a screenshot from my friend from a group chat, and it was all of them, the people that, you know, asked for money, basically saying that they played me like a fiddle. So I turned my phone off, I started playing Siege, and my brain started moving. You know, the cogs started turning. And after that day, I started trying to say no. But not even with just no, even impressing people or apologizing for things that aren't my fault. And it was hard. It was way harder than I thought it would be. The first thing I did was I started noticing when I was doing it. Like every time I caught myself overthinking something or worrying about someone's thought, I would just not, well, I would try just to not care. But since, I'm a people pleaser, I had to take that extra step and ask myself, like, does this actually matter? Does this person matter? Does this person's opinion actually affect my life? And I'll tell you, most of the time, the answer is no. I'd be stressing about some random person I barely know. And from there, I started saying no. Like at first, I felt kind of sick. Very anxious. I was very anxious about it. Because like my brain was convinced something bad was going to happen. But nothing happened. Most people, I say most because some people do care if you say no. But most, they don't really care. Especially if they don't know who you are. They just ask someone else. Like I made the rule for myself to only say sorry if I actually did something wrong. Or I was in like the shoulder of a walkway when everything's open and someone like hits my shoulder, like slams it. Oh yeah, sorry dude. What? No. Or like just because I had an opinion. Like I had to physically stop myself from saying sorry or taking back something I said because I did that a lot. And slowly things would start to change. And the first thing you'd notice is that some people won't like the new version of you. Like the people who were used to me saying yes, always going along with things or whatever it is, they didn't like that I was, standing up for myself. Basically standing up for myself. Yeah, like they didn't like that I wouldn't go along with their jokes. And it really shows who actually cares about you. Because the people who stuck around were the people who liked me for me, not what I did for them. I also started making like way better decisions. Like I'd stop choosing things based on how they looked and start choosing things based on what I actually wanted. Me being able to chill out definitely got easier because I constantly didn't really care what I said or did. I wasn't replaying conversations in my head. I wasn't worried about every little thing. And I started being myself, like the actual version of me, not the performative, jester, basically. Because when I moved to this new school, I was trying to stand out very hard. Too much. Because when I started doing that, my grades, dude, they slipped. They were getting bad. I graduated with a pretty good GPA, but freshman year, horrible. Horrible. But after graduating high school, a lot of people, surprisingly, no one talked to me. Except like maybe 10 people out of a lot of people that I would talk to that I thought were my friends. And that's just kind of what happens when you're so nice and you consider everyone friends. Like even at work, oh, I talked to this person once and they were nice to me. That's my friend. No, they're not. That's a coworker just being nice. That's really it. And most of you guys are probably in school. So in class, if someone just talks to you once, they're not your friend. You can try to be friends with them, but just know it's not a guarantee. But anyway, I used to care a lot, way too much. I hope you guys learn something about me being an idiot. And
Knowledge is power. It's the reason our species escaped the limits of our natural instincts and began shaping our world deliberately. It's how we cured diseases that once wiped out entire cities, split the atom, and sent instruments beyond Earth itself. In the span of just a few centuries, it turned humanity from a fragile animal into a global force capable of rewriting the conditions of its own existence. On an individual level, knowledge is still power. It determines what doors open for us, what work we can do, what rooms we are allowed into, and what futures we are able to pursue. We try our best.
Test 3. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 parts. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Part 1. Part 1. You will hear a man talking to the coordinator of a photography club. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hello, Wayside Camera Club. Breeder speaking.
Oh, hello. My name's Dan, and I'd like to join your club.
That's great, Dan. We have an application form. Would you like to complete it over the phone? Then you can ask any questions you might have.
Oh, yes, thanks.
Okay. So, what's your family name?
It's Green. Dan Green.
So, can I take your email address?
Yes, it's dan1068@market.com.
Thanks. And what about your home address?
Well, I'm about 10 miles away from your club in Peacetown. I live in a house there.
Okay. So, what's the house number and street?
It's 52 Marrowfield Street.
Is that MARROWFIELD?
That's right.
And that's Peacetown, you said.
Uh-huh.
So, how did you hear about our club? Did you look on the internet?
I usually do that, but this time, well, I was talking to a relative the other day, and he suggested it.
Oh, is he a member too?
He belongs to another club, but he'd heard good things about yours.
Okay. So, what do you hope to get from joining?
Well, one thing that really interests me is the competitions that you have. I enjoy entering those.
Right. Anything else?
Well, I also like to socialise with other photographers.
That's great. So, what type of membership would you like?
What are the options?
It's £30 a year for full membership, or £20 a year if you're an associate.
I think I'll go for the full membership then.
That's a good idea, because you can't vote in meetings with an associate membership.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
If I could just find out a bit more about you.
Okay.
So, you said you wanted to compete. Have you ever won any photography competitions?
Not yet, but I have entered 3 in the past.
Oh, that's interesting. So, why don't you tell me something about those? Let's start with the first one.
Well, the theme was entitled Domestic Life.
I see. So, it had to be something related to the home?
Yeah, I chose to take a photo of a family sitting round the dinner table having a meal. And, I didn't win, but I did get some feedback.
Oh, what did the judges say?
That it was too busy as a picture.
Aha. So it was the composition of the picture that they criticised?
That's right. And once they'd told me that, I could see my mistake.
So what was the theme of the second composition?
Well, my university was on the coast, and that area gets a lot of beautiful sunsets. So that was the theme.
Oh, sunsets. That's a great theme.
Yes, the instructions were to capture the clouds as well. It couldn't just be blue sky and a setting sun.
Sure, because they give you all those amazing pinks and purples.
Yeah, and I thought I'd done that well, but the feedback was that I should have waited a bit longer to get the shot.
I see. So the timing wasn't right.
Yes, I took it too soon, basically. And then the third competition I entered was called Animal Magic.
Well, that's a difficult subject.
I know. I had to take hundreds of shots.
I'm sure, because animals move all the time.
That's what we had to show. There had to be some movement in the scene. I got a great shot of a fox in the end, but I took it at night, and, well, I suspected that it was a bit dark, which is what I was told.
Well, Dan, you seem to be really keen, and we'd be delighted to have you in our club. I'm sure we can help with all those areas that you've outlined.
Thanks, that's great.
That is the end of Part 1. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to Part 1. Part 2. You will hear an expert on picking wild mushrooms called Dan talking on the radio. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
This evening, we're delighted to welcome Dan Beagle, who's just written a book on looking for and finding food in the wild. He's going to tell us everything we need to know about picking wild mushrooms.
Thank you very much. Well, I need to start by talking about safety. You really need to know what you're doing because some mushrooms are extremely poisonous. Having said that, once you know what to look for, it's really worth doing for the amazing variety of mushrooms available, which you can't get in the shops. But of course, you have to be very careful, and that's why I always say you should never consume mushrooms picked by friends or neighbours. Always remember that some poisonous mushrooms look very similar to edible ones, and it's easy for people to get confused. The other thing to avoid is mushrooms growing beside busy roads, for obvious reasons. But nothing beats the taste of freshly picked mushrooms. Don't forget that the ones in the shops are often several days old and past their best. There are certain ideas about wild mushrooms that it's important to be aware of. Don't listen to people who tell you that it's only okay to eat mushrooms that are pale or dull. This is completely untrue. Some edible mushrooms are bright red, for example. Personally, I prefer mushrooms cooked, but it won't do you any harm to eat them uncooked, in salads. It's not necessary to peel them. Another thing you should remember is that you can't tell if a mushroom is safe to eat by its smell. Some of the most deadly mushrooms have no smell and taste quite nice, apparently. Finally, just because deer or squirrels eat a particular mushroom doesn't mean that you can.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Of course, mushroom picking is associated with the countryside, but if you haven't got a car, your local park can be a great place to start. There are usually a range of habitats where mushrooms grow, such as playing fields and wooded areas. But you need to be there first thing in the morning, as there's likely to be a lot of competition. Not just from people, but wildlife too. The deer often get the best mushrooms in my local park. If you're a complete beginner, I wouldn't recommend going alone or relying on photos in a book, even the one I've written. There are some really good phone apps for identifying mushrooms, but you can't always rely on getting a good signal in the middle of a wood. If possible, you should go with a group led by an expert. You'll stay safe and learn a lot that way. Conservation is a really important consideration, and you must follow a few basic rules. You should never pick all the mushrooms in one area. Collect only enough for your own needs. Be very careful that you don't trample on young mushrooms or other plants. And make sure you don't pick any mushrooms that are endangered and protected by law. There's been a decline in some varieties of wild mushrooms in this part of the country. Restaurants are becoming more interested in locally sourced food like wild mushrooms, but the biggest problem is that so many new houses have been built in this area in the last 10 years. And more water is being taken from rivers and reservoirs because of this, and mushroom habitats have been destroyed. Anyway, a word of advice on storing mushrooms. Collect them in a brown paper bag, and as soon as you get home, put them in the fridge. They'll be fine for a couple of days, but it's best to cook them as soon as possible. After washing them really carefully first, of course. So, everybody knows what a mushroom tastes like, right? Well, you'll be surprised by the huge variety of wild mushrooms there are. Be adventurous. They're great in so many dishes. Stir-fries, risottos, pasta. But just be aware that some people can react badly to certain varieties, so it's a good idea not to eat huge quantities to begin with. OK, so now I'm going to show you a few examples of poisonous...
That is the end of part 2. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to part 2. Part 3. You will hear two business students discussing automation and the future of work. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
That seminar yesterday on automation and the future of work was really good, wasn't it? Looking at the first industrial revolution in Britain in the 19th century and seeing how people reacted to massive change was a real eye-opener.
Yes, it was interesting to hear how people felt about automation then and what challenges they faced. I didn't know that first started with workers in the textile industry.
With those protesting workers called the Luddites destroying their knitting machines because they were so worried about losing their jobs.
Yes, and ultimately they didn't achieve anything. And anyway, industrialisation created more jobs than it destroyed.
Yes, that's true. But it probably didn't seem a positive thing at the time. I can see why the Luddites felt so threatened.
I know. I'm sure I would have felt the same. The discussion about the future of work was really optimistic for a change. I like the idea that work won't involve doing boring, repetitive tasks, as robots will do all that. Normally, you only hear negative stuff about the future.
Bit too optimistic, don't you think? For example, I can't see how people are about to have more leisure time when all the evidence shows people are spending longer than ever at work.
No, that's true. And what about lower unemployment? I'm not so sure about that.
Perhaps in the long term, but not in the foreseeable future.
And I expect most people will be expected to work until they're much older, as everyone's living much longer.
That's already happening.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 25 to 30.
I enjoyed all that stuff on how technology has changed some jobs, and how they're likely to change in the near future.
Yeah, incredible. Like accountants. You might think all the technological innovations would have put them out of a job, but in fact there are more of them than ever. They're still really in demand and have become far more efficient.
Right, that was amazing. 20 times more accountants in this country compared to the 19th century.
I know. I'd never have thought the demand for hairdressing would have gone up so much in the last 100 years. One hairdresser for every 287 people now, compared to one for over 1,500.
Yeah, because people's earning power has gone up so they can afford to spend more on personal services like that.
But technology hasn't changed the actual job that much.
No, they've got hairdryers, etc. But it's one job where you don't depend on a computer. The kind of work that administrative staff do has changed enormously, thanks to technology. Even 20 years ago, there were secretaries doing dictation and typing.
Yes, really boring compared to these days, when they're given much more responsibility and higher status.
A lot of graduates go in for this kind of work now. I'd expected there to be a much bigger change in the number of agricultural workers in the 19th century, but the 1871 census showed that roughly 25% of the population worked on the land.
Yeah, I'd have assumed it would be more than 50%. Now it's less than 0.2%.
What about care workers?
They barely existed in the 19th century, as people's lifespan was so much shorter. But now, of course, this sector will see huge growth.
Yeah, and it's hard enough to meet current demand. The future looks quite bleak for bank clerks. They've been in decline since ATMs were introduced in the 80s.
And technology will certainly make most of the jobs they do now redundant, I think.
I agree. Although the situation may change, it's very hard to predict what will happen.
That is the end of Part 3. You now have 30 seconds to check your answers to Part 3. Part 4. You will hear part of a lecture for astronomy students about the need for a system to manage satellites and other objects orbiting the Earth. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
In today's astronomy lecture, I'm going to talk about the need for a system to manage the movement of satellites and other objects in orbit around the Earth. In other words, a space traffic management system. We already have effective air traffic control systems that are used internationally to ensure that planes navigate our skies safely. Well, space traffic management is a similar concept, but focusing on the control of satellites. The aim of such a system would be to prevent the danger of collisions in space between the objects in orbit around the Earth. In order to do this, we'd need to have a set of legal measures, and we'd also have to develop the technical systems to enable us to prevent such accidents. But unfortunately, at present, we don't actually have a space traffic management system that works. So why not? What are the problems in developing such a system? Well, for one thing, satellites are relatively cheap these days, compared with how they were in the past, meaning that more people can afford to put them into space. So there's a lot more of them out there, and people aren't just launching single satellites, but whole constellations, consisting of thousands of them designed to work together. So space is getting more crowded every day. But in spite of this, one thing you may be surprised to learn is that you can launch a satellite into space, and once it's out there, it doesn't have to send back any information to Earth to allow its identification. So while we have international systems for ensuring we know where the planes in our skies are, and to prevent them from colliding with one another, when it comes to the safety of satellites, at present we don't have anything like enough proper ways of tracking them. And it isn't just entire satellites that we need to consider. A greater threat is the huge amount of space debris in orbit around the Earth, broken bits of satellite and junk from space stations and so on. And some of these are so small that they can be very hard to identify, but they can still be very dangerous. In addition, some operators may be unwilling to share information about the satellites they've launched. For example, a satellite may be designed for military purposes, or it may have been launched for commercial reasons, and the operators don't want competitors to have information about it. And even if the operators are willing to provide it, the information isn't easy to collect. Details are needed about the object itself, as well as about its location at a particular time. And remember that a satellite isn't very big, and it's likely to be moving at thousands of kilometers an hour. We don't have any sensors that can constantly follow something moving so fast, so all that the scientists can do is to put forward a prediction concerning where the satellite is heading next. So those are some of the problems that we're facing. Let's consider now some of the solutions that have been suggested. One key issue is the way in which information is dealt with. We need more information, but it also needs to be accessible at a global level. So we need to establish shared standards that we can all agree on for the way in which this information is presented. We already do this in other areas of science, so although this is a challenge, it's not an impossible task. Then as all this information's collected, it needs to be put together so it can be used, and that will involve creating a single database on which it can be entered. As we continue to push forward new developments, congestion of the space environment is only going to increase. To cope with this, we need to develop a system like the one I've described to coordinate the work of the numerous spacecraft operators. But it's also essential that this system is one that establishes trust in the people that use it, both nationally and at a global level. One interesting development that I'll mention...
That is the end of part 4. You now have 1 minute to check your answers to part 4. That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the listening answer sheet.
Yeah.
Jobs.
Yes, and ultimately they didn't achieve anything. And anyway, industrialisation created more jobs than it destroyed.
Yes, that's true. Jobs.
Yes, and
Jobs.
yes, and ultimately they didn't achieve anything.
Jobs.
Yes, and ultimately they didn't achieve anything. And anyway, industrialisation created more jobs than it destroyed.
Yes, that's true. But it probably didn't seem a positive thing at the time. I can see why the Luddites felt so jobs.
Yes, and ultimately they didn't achieve anything. And anyway, industrialisation created more jobs than it destroyed.
Yes, that's true. For example, I can't see how people are about to have more leisure time when all the evidence shows people are spending longer than ever at work.
No, that's true. And what about lower unemployment? I'm not so sure about that.
Perhaps in the long term, but not in the foreseeable. For example, I can't see how people are about to have more leisure time when all the evidence shows people are spending longer than ever at work.
No, that's true. And what about...
Like accountants. You might think all the technological innovations would have put them out of a job, but in fact there are more of them than ever. They're still really in demand and have become far more... Like accountants. You might think all the technological innovations would have put them out of a job, but in fact there are more of... Like accountants. You might think all the technological innovations would have put them out of a job, but in fact there are more of them than ever. They're still really in demand and have become far more efficient.
Right, that was amazing. 20 times more accountants.
Like account...
I enjoyed all that stuff on how technology has changed some jobs, and how they're likely to change in the near future.
Yeah, incredible. Like accountants. You might think all the technological innovations would have put them out of a job, but in fact there are more of them than ever. They're still really in demand and have become far more efficient.
Right, that was amazing. 20 times more accountants in this country compared to the 19th century.
I know. I'd never have thought the demand for hairdressing would have gone up so much in the last 100 years. One hairdresser for every 287 people now, compared to one for over 1,500.
Yeah, because people's earning power has gone up so they can afford to spend more on personal services like that.
But technology hasn't changed the actual job that much.
No, they've got hairdryers, etc. But it's one job where you don't depend on a computer. The kind of work that administrative staff do has changed enormously, thanks to technology. Even 20 years ago, there were secretaries doing dictation and typing.
Yes, really boring compared to these days, when they're given much more responsibility and higher status.
A lot of graduates go in for this kind of work now. I'd expand.
Yeah, I'd have assumed it would be more than 50%. Now it's less than 0.2%.
What about care workers?
They barely existed in the 19th century, as people's lifespan was so much shorter. But now they barely existed in the 19th century, as people's lifespan was so much shorter. But now, of course, this sector will see huge growth.
Yeah, and it's hard enough to meet current demand. The future looks quite bleak for bank clerks. They've been in decline since ATMs were introduced in the 80s.
And technology...
Don't listen to people who tell you that it's only okay to eat mushrooms that are pale or dull. This is completely untrue. Some edible mushrooms are bright red, for example. Personally, I prefer mushrooms cooked, but it won't do you any harm to eat them uncooked, in salads. It's not necessary to peel them. Another thing you should remember is that you can't tell if a mushroom is safe to eat by its smell. Some of the most deadly mushrooms have no smell and taste quite nice, apparently. Finally, just because deer, you should never pick all the mushrooms in one area. Collect only enough for your own needs. Be very careful that you don't trample on young mushrooms or other plants. And make sure you don't pick any mushrooms that are endangered and protected by law. There's been a decline in some varieties of wild mushrooms in this part of the country. Restaurants are becoming more interested in locally sourced food, like wild mushrooms. But the biggest problem is that so many new houses have been built in the
Yes, it was interesting to hear how people felt about automation then and what challenges they faced. I didn't know that first started with work
Section 1. You will hear a woman inquiring about a job vacancy. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 4. You will see that there is an example that has been done for you. On this occasion only, the conversation relating to this will be played first.
Hi there. Welcome to the Job Centre. How can I help?
Good morning. I'm here to inquire as to whether you have any jobs available at the moment.
Yes, we have several available. What kind of job is it that you're looking for?
Well, I'll take any part-time jobs I can get. I'm really strapped for cash at the moment.
The type of work the woman is looking for is a part-time job, so part-time has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi there. Welcome to the Job Centre. How can I help?
Good morning. I'm here to inquire as to whether you have any jobs available at the moment.
Yes, we have several available. What kind of job is it that you're looking for?
Well, I'll take any part-time jobs I can get. I'm really strapped for cash at the moment.
OK. Bear with me while I have a browse on our system. Here we are. We have 3 vacancies at the moment, all involving quite different roles.
That sounds promising. What are they?
The first one is for a post as a receptionist. It says here that experience in reception or general administration is preferred, but not essential. Have you worked on a reception desk previously?
No, I haven't. I had a baby quite young, and so I have very little work experience. Could you tell me a few more details?
Yes, of course. The job will be to mainly provide quality customer service, both over the phone and in person. When customers are waiting, you will be expected to provide them with refreshments and ensure they have a first-rate experience.
I think I could manage that, and I'm a very friendly person.
That's great.
Do you have any information about the hours involved?
It says here that you will be expected to work several early mornings, 4 days a week.
Any other requirements?
Yeah. You'll have to go through a couple of weeks of unpaid training before qualifying for the post.
I don't know if I would be able to fully commit to that. Did you say it's 4 days per week?
Yeah. It says here 4 days a week, with another day off per week when requested in advance. It also explicitly states that at least one of your working days must fall on a weekend.
I'll have to think about that and talk to my babysitter.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10. Section 1. You will hear a woman. The conversation relates.
How can I help?
This occasion only. The conversation relating to this will be played first. Name has been written in as and answer.
How can I help?
Good morning. I'm here to inquire as to whether you have any jobs available at the moment.
Yes, we have several available. What kind of job is it that you're looking for?
Well, I'll take any part-time jobs I can get. I'm really strapped for cash at the moment.
OK. Bear with me while I have a browse on our system. Here we are. We have 3 vacancies at the moment, all involving quite different roles.
That sounds promising. What are they?
The first one is for a post as a receptionist. It says here that experience in reception or general administration is preferred, but not essential. Have you worked on a reception desk previously?
No, I haven't. I had a baby quite young, and so I have very little work experience. Could you tell me a few more details?
Yes, of course. The job will be to mainly provide quality customer service, both over the phone and in person. When customers are waiting, you will be expected to provide them with refreshments and ensure they have a first-rate experience.
I think I could manage that, and I'm a very friendly person.
That's great.
Do you have any information about the hours involved?
It says here that you will be expected to work several early mornings, 4 days a week.
Any other requirements?
Yeah. You'll have to go through a couple of weeks of unpaid training before qualifying for the post.
I don't know if I would be able to fully commit to that. Did you say it's 4 days per week?
Yeah, it says here 4 days a week, with another day off per week when requested in advance. It also explicitly states that at least one of your working days must fall on a weekend.
I'll have to think about that and talk to my babysitter.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 5 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 5 to 10.
Are there any other roles beginning later in the day?
Yes, there's an advertisement here for a driver. It says you'll need a clean and valid UK driver's license, with absolutely no exception.
No problems there. I passed my test first time and have never received any points.
It also explicitly states that you must be over 25 and have been driving for at least 6 years.
That sounds quite exciting. Is there any more information?
Yep, it says here that working hours are flexible and the employers are happy to work within your personal schedule since they employ multiple drivers.
That's great.
The employers ask for a commitment to either mornings 5 days per week, evenings 5 days per week, or 3 full working days per week.
I'm sure I can handle all that without a problem.
As well as driving the employers to and from work, they will ask you to perform various duties on their behalf, such as collecting the grocery shopping and picking their children up from school.
Do they need me to work a day on the weekend as well?
No, it says here that they only require you to work on weekdays, not weekends.
That sounds interesting.
Okay, there's only one more left, another customer service related post. It looks like it 3 full working days per week.
I'm sure I can handle all that without a problem.
As well as driving the employers to and from work, they will ask you to perform various duties on their behalf, such as collecting the grocery shopping and picking their children up from school.
Do they need me to work a day on the weekend as well?
No, it says here that they only require you to work on weekdays, not weekends.
That sounds interesting.
Okay, there's only one more left, another customer service related post. It looks like it requires you to work short hours, quite late at night, so it might not be suitable for you. Do you want to hear about it anyway?
Yeah, can't do any harm.
Okay, so it's a post for a cashier in a cinema in the centre of town. I'm sure you've been to the cinema a few times, so you can guess what kind of role it would be. They're quite short and late shifts, between 5:30 and 10:30 most nights, with slightly longer shifts on Friday and Saturday nights.
Can you tell me what the job involves?
Yes, sure. It says that you'll be required to sell and dispense tickets and provide refreshments. Also, they ask that you be quick on the computers, since you'll also need to take bookings over the phone, but you'll receive basic training for that.
Do they need me to work weekdays as well?
Well, it says you'll also need to take bookings over the phone, but you'll receive basic training for that.
Do they need me to work weekdays as well?
Well, it says here that if you request at least a fortnight in advance, they will grant you a day off on Mondays, but never on a weekend.
I'll think it over and let you know later. Thanks for all your help.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 2. You will hear a representative from an organisation called Connection giving a talk about a homestay organisation. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Now turn to section 2. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Thank you all for coming to my talk this evening. It's nice to see so many people in the audience. For those of you who don't know very much about Connection, let me start by giving you some background information about it. Connection is a British organisation that facilitates homestays all over the globe. This organisation prides itself on matching tens of thousands of host families with guests every single year, allowing travellers to discover a country's culture in a way like no other. Homestays are ideal for both travellers and homeowners, enabling intercultural exchanges and the development of lifelong friendships while providing travellers with often discounted accommodation costs and host families with a steady income from the comfort of their own homes. The homestay experience is particularly popular with university exchange students looking for a more genuine insight into their country of choice and an unrivaled opportunity to develop their language skills. The homestay experience is truly unique and once in a lifetime, and one that you will likely remember for the rest of your lives. It is important to note, however, that some people will find it difficult to adapt to the new country, with many enduring what is known as culture shock. Connection's advice for those suffering from culture shock is to go out and make as many friends as possible, no matter how difficult you may find it. Friends are guaranteed to help you feel more integrated as part of the local society and show you some great places to hang out. At first, it might seem extremely challenging to overcome the language barrier between you and your host family. However, you will find that you quickly overcome this and develop a very close and almost familial relationship. Many of our travellers have suggested that they have found discussing their hobbies and other interests with their host families is the best way to overcome any barriers, since you are more likely to find something you share in common. For example, you might find that you are both passionate about football and end up playing in the local field every week. One of our guests undertaking a homestay in a rural area of the UK told us that she and her host now take a Tai Chi class together upon a hilltop at sunrise, calling the experience absolutely breathtaking. After the first few weeks, you will find your understanding of the people around you and their culture deepens by leaps and bounds, and you will soon become one of the locals. Our hosts in over 140 countries turn a location into a culture, time into experience, and strangers into friends.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
So how can you find out about applying for a homestay? The best way would be to visit Connection's website, www.connection.com, and contact one of their friendly advisors for more information. Once you have confirmed your interest in the service, we would strongly advise that you remain in close contact with the registration office, which will send you several emails keeping you up to date with potential matches in your country of choice. Once registered, Connection will require you to send various documents and will act as an intermediary between you and the host family prior to final confirmation and payment. During this stage, Connection will ask you to provide 2 photos, one for the host family and the other for our own records. Please ensure that you sign the back of each photo. Due to the nature of the service Connection provides, security is an absolute must, and they will ask you to send in photocopies of your passport, birth certificate, and a bank statement as confirmation of your identity. On receipt of these documents, the official process will begin and your bank account will be debited for the initial deposit of £200. If you haven't received any acknowledgement confirming receipt of these documents from us within 7 working days, please contact the main office. As I mentioned, and your bank account will be debited for the initial deposit of £200. If you haven't received any acknowledgement confirming receipt of these documents from us within 7 working days, please contact the main office. As I mentioned before, due to the nature of the organisation, Connection operates a meticulous screening process, and all applicants will undergo an interview in our head office in London, with exceptions made in extreme circumstances. After your interview, it may take us several weeks to carry out the decision process, so please be patient with us. If you would like a fast-track service, please indicate this on your application, and we will notify you of the additional charges. Finally, once we have come to a result about your application, you will receive a decision in the post. If you do not receive an offer of placement, we will refund your deposit within 7 working days.
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 3. You will hear a conversation between 2 students and their professor discussing an essay. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26. Now turn to section 3. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 26.
For next week, I'd like you to undertake a piece of research in preparation for writing your final essay. In order to gain top marks, you must include a range of primary, secondary, and tertiary sources. Are there any questions?
Yes, Professor, I have a question. We haven't yet covered how to undertake this sort of research in much depth, and I'm a little unsure of what you want us to do. In telling us to include primary sources, do you mean you want us to design and distribute a questionnaire, analysing the results?
You could design a questionnaire, but you'll soon find that distributing a questionnaire on such a large scale is somewhat troublesome. We couldn't possibly expect you to do it effectively as an individual university student without the necessary resources. No, ideally, I would like you to form 1 or 2 focus groups and interview them. This will provide you with a more qualitative approach. If your strengths lie in mathematics, please by all means take a more quantitative approach, but this will be more strenuous and time-consuming, and isn't entirely necessary for the purpose of this study.
Professor, you haven't told us what our project is about. Do we get to choose our own topic based on the previous study?
No, I'm afraid not. This will be a strictly Australian study. However, you can choose which angle you'd like to take, so long as it remains within the realm of anthropology. Does anyone have any questions specifically about the formation of the focus groups? I'd had several emails about this, and I'd like to address it now.
My study is related to growing up in Australia and the question of nature versus nurture. I've gathered more than 200 school children who would be happy to participate in a focus group. Do you think we'll need to include that many participants in a focus group?
Blimey, Douglas, well done for finding that many willing children, but you definitely don't need that many for the study you're going to undertake. I'd say you need no more than 5 children per group, and no more than 3 groups, so 15 children altogether. You definitely need to control the group size in order to generate a meaningful dialogue.
OK, if it's useful, I'll try and do it.
I appreciate your enthusiasm for the project, but there are plenty of different ways to gather data, and I'm sure that if you look hard enough, you'll find someone who has conducted almost the exact same research in the past. My advice for you is don't be too ambitious, and try to include as much information about various people or sectors.
For those who haven't ever collected original data before, what do you suggest we do?
I would suggest that you read accounts from other people who have undertaken such research to see what advice they can give. I would also encourage you to read Chapter 8 in the course textbook, which should give you a good introduction to collecting data. Moreover, you should try to practice using the data table provided in your course handbook. By now, you should have read at least 6 or 7 books giving quite detailed instruction on how to go about collecting data.
Professor, I don't know about everyone else, but I'm having trouble reading the books. I had a really big assignment for another course, and I've been spending all my time on that. Jane, have you read all the books the professor mentioned?
Well, my trouble is getting hold of the books. I've been to the library several times, but all the books are out.
Sounds like you should have started borrowing books a bit earlier.
Yes, I should have. But I got several ones from my friend a couple of days ago. I just skimmed through them and don't remember a lot of the information.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 27 to 30.
But now let's look at these things. We'll need to start thinking about which ones we'll definitely want to do for the project.
OK, the first one here is the final report.
If you like, we can work together on the research and data collection side of the project, and doing the final write-up.
Cool, that sounds good. I'm not sure how much I'd be able to contribute, considering I haven't had a chance to read the course material, but I should be able to prepare some sheets and a list of questions that can be used during the focus group sessions.
That sounds appropriate. I think so too.
Do you think we'll need to write a letter to send to the participants, telling them the time and place for the interviews?
Positive. I can take care of that.
Well, that's great.
I should also include a document for them to sign, saying that they're happy to be voice recorded.
Oh yes, of course, I forgot about the transcript. That'll likely be a big job, so let's do half each. I'll do one of the groups, and you can do the other, OK?
Sounds like a plan.
That is
Section
the end
4.
of Section 3.
You will
now
hear a
have talk
talk
on the
to
research
check
of
your
the graphical
answers.
symbol. First, You have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about the graphical symbol. A graphic symbol is a written symbol that is used to represent speech, such as those used in the Greek alphabet. The term graphic symbol encompasses anything from the logographs used in Egyptian hieroglyphic writing to ancient Chinese pictograms. Early symbols were based on pictographs and ideograms before they were developed into logographic writing systems. These systems are still in use in some non-literate cultures in Africa, the Americas, and Oceania. Indeed, elements of pictography are still found in modern Chinese characters, and it is often an interesting exercise to trace the origins of some Chinese characters. Pictographs remain in common commercial use today as signs, instructions, or statistical diagrams. Road signs and public toilet signs, and even flat pack assembly instructions utilizing pictures, are considered pictographic. Ancient graphic writing systems provide researchers with a wealth of knowledge about past civilizations. In 1799, one of the most important historical discoveries was made by accident when members of Napoleon's expedition to Egypt found a stone in Rosetta that exhibited 3 different scripts. The stone, now known as the Rosetta Stone, was studied in significant depth by scholars and was first deciphered by Frenchmen Jean-François Champollion in 1822. He was able to correctly determine the phonetic values of the symbols, and later research has confirmed his findings. In many of these symbols, lines are used to portray a multitude of meanings, and knowledge and understanding of these lines holds the key to comprehension of graphic writing systems. A key moment in the history of communication was the invention of the camera obscura, or camera. Although the concept can be traced back to the 5th century BC Chinese philosopher Mo Ti, the first photographic image was ultimately created in 1826 by Joseph Nicephore Nicephh. Photography, as it was later known, enables researchers to piece together and better understand history. Today, photography forms a huge part of everyday life, and most publications contain a vast number of photographs. Photography is used in advertising and is now becoming a way to increase awareness of existing world issues. For example, animal welfare charities are increasingly using photography to advertise animals that are at high risk of endangerment. Charity workers are sometimes flown to far-flung locations to document the suffering endured by high-risk animals in an attempt to raise human awareness of their consumption activities and how they impact others. One recent high-profile campaign was undertaken by attaching a camera to the foot of a bird in order to obtain photographs of the animals in their natural habitats and understand how often they come into contact with human waste. A soon-to-be-released documentary about the suffering of animals on Midway Island shows the full extent to which human consumption is harming animals thousands of miles away from us. As photography continues to progress, with the use of drones now becoming somewhat commonplace, we should expect more and more objects to be included in the future, expanding the horizon of photography ever further. Indeed, the downward pressure on traditional media prices means that media companies are being forced to get creative on how to make a profit. Many have found that the answer to this lies in advertising, and companies are now willing to devote a large portion of their budgets to advertising in newspapers. By the same token, marketing has become an essential part of a company's business model, often meaning the success or failure of a company. As a result, much time and money has been pumped into the development of effective branding, with attractive packaging playing a large role in this. However, many governments are now seen to be cracking down on marketing and packaging in an attempt to protect consumers from being misled. In particular, tobacco companies are now subject to ever-increasing regulation. For example, in the United Kingdom, legislation is soon to pass preventing any form of branding or differentiation on cigarette packaging in efforts to curb the harmful effects of smoking. Finally, one must not forget the fundamental role that graphic writing systems have had to play in mathematics. Graphs, icons, and diagrams often form the very basis of these branches of academia. Indeed, one needs to look no further than chemistry's periodic table to see a perfect example of graphic writing systems in use today.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Section 1. You will hear a woman inquire.
Hi.
The type of work the woman is looking for is a part-time job.
Job Centre.
Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 4.
Hi there. Welcome to the Job Centre. How can I help?
Good morning. I'm here to inquire as to whether you have any jobs available at the moment.
Yes, we have several available. What kind of job?